Good morning. Good morning. How the devil are you doing this fine day? Hope you're all fit and well. We have who do we have in the chat? I can see Mark Whiting has just arrived. Morning, Mark. How are you doing, my friend? Good of you to be with us. There is your button pressed. I know I saw Gary Muirhead going through the chat. So let's say good morning to him. I think I saw Dan Cullen as well. Good morning, chaps. How are we doing? Matteo Chianti, named after the wine, although spelt different, possibly, over on Instagram. Jefferson Operator, Wayne Austin. Loads of people over on Instagram right now, all flow through. Kevin Williams as well, lots and lots there. And Dan Cummins just popped back to say, morning. Busy, only be listening because there are tits using cameras and not mirrors on an ADT. Dan, have you ever thought maybe it's you? Have you ever thought that? Listen, far be it from me to cast aspersions, but you, over the course of the 5 and a bit years this show has been running, you have worked on multiple sites with multiple employers. Every one of them seems to have an issue. There is a possibility that you know your experience is merely indicative of what the real world looks like out there. But are you sure it's not you? Are you absolutely positive? I was going to ask you this morning. Would you like the good news or the bad news first? But listen, only a madman would ask for the good news first and then have it ruined by the bad news. I thought I'd show you 2 news stories. Also, good news and bad news. It takes too long for you guys to react, which I fully understand. I'm gonna do the news, and I'm gonna do it in what I believe to be the right order. And I'm gonna start with the bad news. This is from Construction Index this morning. The latest analysis from Glenigan paints a scary picture for construction. In the 3-month period, May to July, the value of construction project starts in the UK fell by 20% compared to the 3 months previous and by 17% compared to 2024 levels. Not only are project starts in decline, so are contract awards, indicating that starts will continue to decline. All bad. Even worse, detailed planning approvals fell by 55% when measured against the previous 3 months and 36% down on 2024 figures. So, not a good picture. If you remember when we used to have Neil Edwards on the show on a regular basis, you will know that it takes somewhere between 20 and 30 weeks to go from contract award to actual shovels in the ground. So delays now are going to be a problem for the back end of the year. Bad news all round. And obviously the very fact that value of those projects are going down means that nobody's making as much money. So bad news all round. And one of the things that came out there is obviously this idea of planning approvals. Now, planning approvals are an issue. I'm going to take that one away. Just while I'm firing up the next bit, I'm going to say good morning to Jim Turner, and I'm going to press the button that welcomes him to the show. Morning, Jim. Yes, going back to our the planning approval, I need to take that away, and I need to show you a different image, which is this one. Now, just been talking about all things related to planning and stuff. Rachel Reeves is apparently launching a I love the headline. Is launching a fresh war. She's declared war on bats and newts to speed up development. The Treasury is reportedly looking at major reforms, making it more difficult for wildlife concerns to hold up developments. Yes, Rachel Reeves is preparing a fresh bonfire of environmental protection in a bid to accelerate infrastructure building and boost the economy, apparently. Can't see anywhere that this has actually been confirmed as yet. Labour ministers have previously insisted their current planning overhaul would balance growth with nature. And Ms. Reeves is understood to believe that the government must go further. I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to say good. Let me get rid of that first of all, because we don't need to look at Rachel Reeves' happy, smiling face. Good morning to Andy Thornton. Good of you to join us. Andy, I owe you an apology and I owe you a response. I will get to it. I went out yesterday afternoon, didn't get around to it. I'll be back to you. But yes, in answer to your question, we should do that. I'll make that clear. Where do we stand on environmental protection when it comes to newts and bats, and more specifically, how it relates to construction. Now, listen, as a keen outdoorsman, I mean, I spend 99.9% of my time indoors, but I do actually quite like the outdoors. I like a bit of fishing. I do like a bit of a stroll in the woods, occasional game of golf. I like the outdoors. And I have to say, it makes my day stroke evening when I see batty bat. I love to see a bat out in the wild. I think they're a fantastic thing, and I'm glad they're there. Um, the occasional newt. When our kids were young, we used to put a paddling pool in the back garden, leave it there for a couple of days. Guaranteed, you'd have a newt in there one morning. Love to see them. But should they stand in the way of major infrastructure projects? Should they stand in the way of housing projects? I'm finding that one hard to justify. I really am. Listen. I realise, we're all God's creatures, assuming you believe in the existence of an Almighty. But at a time when we need more roads, at a time when we need more rail connections, at a time we need more air connections, at a time we need more houses, should we really allow the presence of Batty Bat to stand in the way? Love to get your thoughts on it. Jim Turner, I think. Yeah, bearing in mind, Jim is rural. Jim lives the life of a farmer, basically. This might be the one good thing Labour could do. And I realise, I guess you have a markedly different relationship with the natural world. I know we were talking a little while ago about killing animals to eat, which, despite the fact that I eat animals, I have no problem with eating them. It sits uncomfortably with me, but I understand that it has to be done. I would imagine you have got a very different take on it. I would imagine, and I'm guessing here, you're not entirely against the notion of fox hunting, because we have urban foxes where we are, and I'm delighted to see them. Don't tell my wife, but I feed them occasionally, which is probably why we ended up with one in our front room not so long ago. I like a fox. Fox out in farming communities, not such a great thing. So where do you stand? Where do you stand on the protection of newts and bats? Dan says, well, bats do change locations if disturbed. Yes, they do. They do. And I mean, I know we've had the provision of bat boxes and stuff like that, but really, uh, I find it a hard balancing act. I'd consider myself an animal lover, and I do genuinely consider myself an animal lover. I generally prefer animals to people, but should they stand in the way? Should they stand in the way? I'm going to say good morning to the marvelous Andy Darvell. Good morning, good morning. Chris Ford says, morning, all. You can have all my foxes with pleasure. I would actually take them. Listen, I realise they're a nuisance. I realise they get on people's nerves. I realise they have a nasty habit of eating the local wildlife and causing damage and nicking your chickens and all that sort of stuff. But as far as I'm concerned, fox, it's a dog, it's a wild dog. I love dogs, love foxes. That's the way I see it. What do we got here? There's Andy Darvell making his presence known. Morning, morning, morning. Dan Cullen says on the A417 they spent 300,000 on a bat house, and when I was there, there was one bat in it as owls were nearby. Yeah, that would be enough to put them off. Andy Darvell says nature finds a way. Surely, if they're moved, they will set up in a new location. Yes, I'm sure they will. I'm sure they will. And listen, I've been on projects where they've built tunnels for newts and toads. Do they know? Well, while you're building a tunnel for your newts and toads, are you sending the toads and the newts a memo, an email? Is there a little tiny sign like that? Toads and newts this way. Can they read? Are they following that? Of course not. Of course not. Yeah, loads to get through today. Bearing in mind we have many amongst us who are equipment operators, a couple of our films today may sit uncomfortably because they are about autonomous machines. But we will get to that in just a moment. First of all, without further ado, hang on a minute. They know it's for them. They do a toolbox tool and have tiny signs. Yes. Listen, I realise we're joking here. You can honestly imagine somebody in a meeting, in a planning meeting now. What if we provided the newts with hard hats? Little up under their chin, hard hats. Yeah, you can see it now. Yes, we've got lots to get through. So without further ado, I'm going to roll the intro, post the question of the day, and get this goddamn show on the goddamn road. Here we go. It is Tuesday, the 19th of August. Welcome to the Breakfast Show. Good morning to Bruno Demolition over on Instagram, by the way. I am your host, Mark Anthony, the Walrus of Demolition, the Lord High Chancellor of live streaming. And in today's show, 100 autonomous XCMG machines conquer the frozen north. Epiroc, sticking with that autonomy theme, Epiroc takes machinery autonomy to the next level. Liebherr is in the pink, and German demolition like you've never seen before. And I have to say, not much more than a minute long, but it's a really good minute. So stick around for that. Plus, in Mark's morning monologue today, what will it take? What will it take? We'll get to that in just a moment. But first, I do need to very quickly remind you of our question of the day, which looks like this. Yeah, this question today has a bit of a sporting theme. And the question is this: if we were decided to hold a Digger Olympics, in what event would you compete? Now, would you fancy going for gold in a trenching competition? Would you fancy yourself for a medal in truck loading? Do you do the world's fastest pre-start checks? You can make up the rules, you can make up the competition. Digger Olympics, what are you going to compete in? Andy Darvell, straight off the mark. The high reach, high jump. I'd pay good money to see that. I'd pay really good money to see that. Gary Muirhead says, going back to our business about newts and bats and stuff, we built a tunnel for a badger crossing out of 600mm plastic pipe, only to be told by ecologists that badgers don't like walking on plastic. How do they know? Did they receive a letter of complaint from the badger community? Outraged badger of Glasgow. I'm sorry, my paws just cannot abide walking on plastic. Yeah. Jim Turner says, most animals need to be managed, just like our surroundings. Our countryside doesn't look like this by accident. It's been sculpted mostly by developments in agricultural processes and industry. It has. That is why we have our hedgerows, and I'm grateful for them. But now the rules and regs are being made up by folks that have never lived in the areas they are managing. How true? Listen, yeah, that's not just to do with rural regs and rules and regulations. How many rules and regulations within this industry, demolition, construction, waste, recycling, mining, quarry, how many rules have been made up by people that have never actually done the job? And listen, we have something of a health and safety type person in our midst with Andy Thornton. He knows his way around a bit of health and safety, including mental health and safety, which is what I'm going to be speaking to him about. But you can't make rules in splendid isolation. They have to relate to the job in hand, and they have to be viable. In order to abide by a rule, that they need to be abidable. That's not a word. I've just made that up, but you get what I'm talking about. Andy Thornton, speak of the devil. He says, be it badgers or foxes, while there's a green belt, there's somewhere for them to go. But with newts, etc., they need specific conditions to live, and that's why crested newts are endangered. Where do we stand on that? Now, listen, have I ever seen a crested newt in the wild? I think I may have seen one back in the day, but no, not many. But listen, I don't want any species driven to extinction, although I do tend to reserve my pity for endangered species to the big ones, rhinos and tigers and whales and elephants and stuff like that. But crested newts, I don't want to see the back end of crested newts. But if it is a toss-up, and maybe I'm on the wrong side of history here, but if it's a toss-up between providing a home for some humans or possibly relocating a crested newt, I'm going with the humans. Call me a bad guy, call me an animal hater if you call me anti-newtist if you wish, but that's the way I'm going. What is everybody else saying? Hang on a minute. I'm sure this must relate to something else. Dan says he was using a camera, has no situational awareness, and wasn't watching mirrors, almost reversed off a heap. I can't actually see what that relates to. Oh, hang on a minute. Right the way back. It says, no, it's not. I said maybe it was Dan that was the problem. He says, no, it's not. I show them where I want. They're not watching where I positioned to tip. They nearly backed off the heap, not aware of his position. So Dan claiming innocence, and I'm sure he's absolutely right to do so. Let's have a look. What do we got here? Demo Darv says, I would say most rules are made up by at least 75% of people who have never done the job, just learned about it in a book, done 2 or 3 site visits, wearing very clean PPE. Yes, nothing like spotless PPE to make you stand out like a sore thumb. I was on a job. I won't name names because I'm a big fan of the demolition company involved, but I was on a job up in the Midlands not so long ago, and not they, but somebody had invited local dignitaries along, and it wasn't a demolition company; it was actually a developer had invited along the local MP, and the local MP was a little lady. I don't mean that in a derogatory sense. She was about 5'1", I suppose, tiny little lady. I didn't get a close look, but I would hazard a guess that her feet were probably about a size 4 or 5, 6 at a push. Even 6 would have looked quite large. I think they'd given her a pair of size 12 boots. As a result, she was walking like Charlie Chaplin, feet turned out. Wish I'd filmed it. It's very good. Jim Turner says it doesn't work because those that crave and rise to power are quite often the very people that shouldn't have any. Yes, I do remember many years ago, Billy Connolly saying precisely that. Anybody that wants to be an MP should be immediately barred from being one. Yes, that's a power grab, and no mistake. That's somebody that's power crazed. You actually want to be an MP. There's something fundamentally wrong. Don't forget, we are looking for what you would compete in the Digger Olympics as our question of the day. While you're mulling that over, I'm going to play this because we're off to the frozen north in just a moment with XCMG. To be honest, I've kind of keyed it in. The translation on this isn't marvellous, but the application certainly is. XCMG, tell us about it.
World premiere of 100 autonomous electric mining trucks in zero carbon operation.
这就是我们的100台无人矿卡。安全是我们考虑的第一要素。
100 mining trucks achieve L4 autonomous operation 24/7, supported by a triple emergency braking system and a multi-model neural perception network for robust safety redundancy. Validated through 350,000 kilometers under extreme cold and saturated mining environments. Built upon 260,000 cubic meters of stripping data, 2,500 plus fault codes, 60 core technical upgrades, and over 50 algorithm iterations. Forging the smart mining core with hundreds of patents.
零碳矿山才会绿水青山。
A mighty steel fleet powered by green photovoltaic energy achieves zero carbon emissions across all operations. transporting 100 million cubic meters of Earth reduces carbon dioxide emissions by 48,000 tons. As 5G base stations redefine remote landscapes, engineers integrate advanced digital systems into zero-carbon mines achieving centimeter-level precision.
商业上的可行性，才能让我们走得更远。
A fleet of 100 mining trucks and excavators of collaborates with centimeter-level precision, achieving over 22 effective working hours daily. Each operational cycle is shortened by 8 minutes, enabling 8 additional hauls per day, and saving 27.2 million RMB in annual labor costs. A 6-minute rapid battery swap, battery thermal management system, and ensure unlimited battery life in extremely cold weather of minus 40 degrees Celsius. 120% higher than manual operations. World premiere of 100 autonomous electric mining trucks in zero-carbon operation. XCMG expands application boundaries through technological depth, enhances service quality with digital breadth, and safeguards our planet with ecological commitment, building a sustainable future for human engineering civilization.
Not much you need to say about that, is there? I'm going to go back to Andy Darvell, who says 6-minute battery swap. Take heed, Elon. Yeah, 6-minute battery swap, which is, phenomenal. The other one that stood out was they're operating in minus 40 degrees. I know one of the concerns over electric batteries and stuff is their ability to operate in extremes of temperature. Minus 40 degrees, I would suggest, is a very severe extreme in temperature. And those are coping really quite nicely. Have to say, hats off to the fine folks at XCMG. Just wish their translation was as good as their machines. And I'm going to go back also to Andy Darvell, who says, cool looking trucks. They look like massive modern Unimogs. They do. One of the things that I've found, XCMG have done it, Lugong have done it as well. This notion of electric mining trucks, it does seem to have given them the ability to go back and think about the design. When you look at the design of alternative fueled Komatsus, Liebherrs, Caterpillars, they all look exactly the same as the diesel versions. The electric versions of the Lugongs and the XCMGs, markedly different. They look like something straight out of Thunderbirds, like how the past might have imagined the future. If you get my meaning. Jim Turner says, I was listening to a podcast the other day, and one of the panel said the minimum age for MPs and anyone in politics should be 50, so they had some real-world experience first. The same could be said for a lot of construction demolition jobs. If folk have to rise through the ranks, they'd understand more of the job they end up doing. Yeah, funnily enough, I find myself sat on the fence on that one. I can see what you're saying, but one of the things I think is a bit of an issue. I mean, you've mentioned MPs, so let's relate that to politics. You think about the situation we've got and we've had recently in American politics. The choice between the two presidential candidates last time was between a very old Joe Biden and a very old Donald Trump. Both have been accused of suffering from cognitive decline. And both in various ways. And listen, you all know my politics. I don't need to bore you with it. But both, in their own very specific way, seem to be harking back to an America of old. I think Donald Trump is harking back to an America of old where he firmly believes everyone was white. Obviously, we know the truth of that. And I think Joe Biden was harking back to a day when everything, followed the rule of the church and so on down the line, very spiritually led and that kind of thing, all of which is fine. But we live in a world now that in which development is probably faster than any time in human history. When you think about the advent of the internet and AI and all of these things, I do wonder if an entirely old bunch of politicians are really equipped to deal with the changes of today. And when you then apply that to grotty on my mouse here. When you apply that to something like the construction industry or the demolition industry. So think about the National Federation of Demolition Contractors as just as an example off the top of my head. The chances are you're not going to apply to be, an actual officer of the NFDC, probably much before the time you're 40 odd, maybe a bit later than that. You're not coming straight out of school. You don't have the experience. You're probably not high up enough in your company to afford the time and everything else. So you're probably applying to do that in your 40s, maybe your 50s. If you then go through the proper channels, i.e., you go through regional, so you become a regional vice chairman, you then go to national, so you become an officer, a second vice president, president. So by the time you actually get to the hot seat, the chances are you're now 60 odd. If you're 60 odd, excuse me, if you're 60 odd, do you really have your finger on the pulse of things like hydrogenization and electrification? Do you have your finger on the pulse of embodied carbon and the environmental lobby? Do you have your finger on the pulse of AI and autonomy and remote control? Or are you now above all that? And if you are above all that, which is absolutely acceptable, but if you are you really the right person to be leading the wider industry? Or in the case of politicians, the wider country? I do think you need a mix, is what I'm saying. Let's have a look. Dan says, yes, Mark, I do go through some jobs, but I'm all about safety, and so supervisors don't like what I do, not what I say about shortcuts. It's a fair comment. It's a fair comment. And listen, is that one of the reasons we have such a transient workforce? Is it not because people are bullied and made to feel uncomfortable, although I do accept that there are plenty of that out there? Or is it a case of you get people like Dan that just go, do you know what? I can't work in these conditions. I cannot stand idly by and keep my mouth shut while people are operating in a dangerous manner. Maybe it's that. And also how operators are behaving and lifting, not doing their checks correctly. Fair comment. Our question of the day, just to remind you very quickly, is if we were to hold a Digger Olympics, what would be your specialist area of competition? Chris Ford says the 100-meter dash is could be break time or home time, or the day after a decent curry. Or yeah, 100-meter dash, not a problem. Step aside, Usain Bolt. I'm coming through. And Dan Cullen agreeing with Jim about the age of politicians and stuff. Andy Dalvell also agreeing. Good point, Jim. Did you see a 19-year-old lad has been put in charge of a council somewhere up north, I believe? What experience and life experience does he have to do that job? Zero. I'm not going to tell you too much about it because we haven't actually had the full conversation, but I had a message from Andy Thornton yesterday telling me about what he does when he's not sat here blathering with us lot. And one of the things he said was the fact that he's not from this industry, but he does have ideas that could and should be of benefit to this industry. And I do wonder about that. Yeah, I take your point, Andy. 19 does seem remarkably young to be holding a position of power within a council. But I do wonder about perspectives. If you have to be white, top end of middle-aged, heterosexual, and married, ideally a churchgoer, and all of those kind of things, that is going to push your decision making and your thought processes down a very, very distinct and very well-trodden path. Maybe every once in a while you need to sprinkle in a bit of 19-year-old. Yeah, I know that's where everybody else is going. I want to go over there. That looks interesting. Maybe that. And I've said this so many times about things like the NFDC as an example. When you've got the entire sort of management of it all roughly the same age, they're all the same gender, they're all largely the same beliefs, and they all influence each other. At some point, you're going to end up with like a homogenized attitude to pretty much everything. It might just need somebody, talking about Andy Thornton here, it might just need somebody to come in out of left field and go, you do realize you don't have to do that, yeah? Or you do realize that, that industry over here, automotive, waste, recycling, aerospace, whatever it might be. They had a similar problem, but what they did was this. That might just apply. Go back to the interview that we did with VJ Nerva a while back. You know, when he was looking at improvements to Bobcat machines, when he was still employed by Bobcat, you know, he was consulting people in like the medical profession and the cryptocurrency profession just to get a wider perspective. Do we have, and I take your point, Andy, about 19-year-olds in positions of power, but do we have a wide enough perspective on the issues that are facing the industry and the nation? Do we? Jim Turner seems a bit bad mannered to apply for such a role. Surely being asked would be a better way of getting the right people. Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess there is a bit of a filter with that. When you think about, you know, your trade associations, there is a bit of an election process. So if you do apply to become, you know, a regional chairman or a regional vice chairman, you then need the support of your members to push you up to the next level. And then you need the support of more members to push you into national. And then you need the support of national. So there is a filter. But yeah, you kind of have to wonder, don't you? And we have seen, certainly within the NFDC, we have seen a very strategic selection of presidents, vice presidents, and second vice presidents, whereby the person that is currently president has already earmarked his vice president in order to carry on whatever he puts in place, if you see what I mean. Mick is here. Good morning, Mick. How are you doing, mate? Hope you're fit and well. Counting down the days, I would imagine. Peter McKenna is here as well. Good morning, y'all. Dan Cullen says, excavator beach ball. He says, beach volleyball with an excavator. Yes, and those tiny little thongs. Not you, Dan. Please, not you, Dan. Demo Darth says, I get what you mean, Mark, and obviously you would have advisors helping him, but have you seen the episode of The Simpsons where Homer's brother puts Homer in charge of making a new car? I have not seen that one. I can only imagine that humour ensues because, you know, Homer Simpson is not the sharpest. But yeah. Question of the day, Chris Ford, the drop ball shot put. Not many competitors out there now. No, there really isn't. Have you ever seen those videos? They're always clips. They always seem to be vertical clips of people ejecting the tool from a hydraulic breaker and sending it off like a missile, like a javelin. That'd be a competition. Line up a bunch of excavators, see how far you could get your tool, your hydraulic breaker tool. Don't go there. We've already touched on all things autonomous. We're doing a bit more in just a moment with Epiroc. So I shall return after this.
If you are enjoying this episode, please consider supporting the show. You can leave us a tip at buymeacoffee.com/demolition news.
Yeah, we're sticking with the theme of all things autonomous. We've seen how they're doing it up in China. We're going elsewhere now with the fine folks at Epiroc.
Having autonomous machinery on site is quite significant for us. We do have the largest autonomous fleet in the world at Solomon.
We had the opportunity to bring the D65s over to Solomon from one of our other sites. From that point, it was all aspects of coordination and getting the Epiroc team onto site, setting up our command centre, working out what the scope of the Autonomous 65s project would be here at Solomon and how we're going to integrate into our existing systems.
The current D65 utilises proven technology like the Epiroc rig control system, also known as RCS, our whole navigation system, HNS, as well as our self-levelling and auto-drill functionality. In addition to this, we've incorporated our autonomous drill plan execution, also known as ADP, which has been proven on our pit viper platforms.
The integration process working with Fortescue was really exciting for us at Epiroc. We managed to bring the autonomous D65s to site and quickly evolve from having one machine to 4 machines, and now we're operating one operator to 4 drills, which was our initial goal to get to that space.
So the Autonomous 65's now over 50% of our D65 fleet. It's integrated seamlessly and just forms part of our day-to-day operation.
We add a teleremote kit so the drill can be controlled remotely from our control room. And further to that, we install an object detection system consisting of an additional 3 LiDARs as well as 2 lasers which are detecting drop-offs.
It's not without its challenges, integrating autonomy into a working mine, but we work through those challenges with Fortescue. We're reaping the benefits now.
It definitely increased runtime over those drills.
The drill's able to operate for a lot longer of the shift, so about 90% of the shift. Precision drilling as well. We know with the GPS setup, the advanced algorithms, and the sensors, we're able to drill the holes exactly where we need to, and that helps us get our best blast.
Minimising the impact of our crewing delays, specifically over fly-in days. We're able to keep those drills producing where historically we'd have all those drills parked up because we've got crew flying in and out. Obviously we have one operator looking after those 4 drills compared to 4.
Much more cost effective to run an efficient mine with autonomous equipment. It's also a really good safety driver for us to get the people out of the cabs to reduce the risk that we're exposed to.
For business improvement strategies like consumable monitoring, things like that, we're able to remove a lot of that operator variability so we can get consistent measurable results, so we can actually see where those improvements are. When we're talking about the small percentages, it's much easier to actually measure them and get that benefit.
The system's performing really well. A lot of the systems have been developed over many, many years. With the automation side, we're only really introducing the auto navigation into that whole process. So now the machine can tram to each hole by itself and drill the hole and move on to the next hole.
So as an improvement to our current D65 automation system, we're working on contour development, whereby we can get the drill drilling at steeper angles than currently it's capable of.
There was a line in that, I don't know if anybody else picked it up. 1 operator per 4 machines. Yeah. Which, in terms of efficiency, fantastic. In terms of employment, it's a worry, isn't it? I'm going to say good morning to Gary Goldsborough. Morning, Gary. How you doing, mate? I haven't spoken to you for a long, long while. And also Mark Alexander Steel Designs over on Instagram. Good morning, gentlemen. Peter McKenna, going back to our Olympics with diggers. Skittles, yeah, Skittles would be good. Skittles, big Skittles, and the D11 is the ball. Wow, I'd love to see that. That's where one man, one vote is the only way to run an organisation. Anyone can be nominated and let the masses decide. But most organisations are just boys' clubs with the reciprocating back scratching constantly going on. Nothing to do with the meritocracy. Power to the people, Jim. Power to the people. You're absolutely 100% on the money. I mean, I do think the NFTC is more than an old boys club these days. I think it's also a travel agency as well, but that's a whole other story. Peter says, have you watched the video of the Virkin stripping top stall on the group? I haven't. Peter, I have a confession to make, and I listen. I do. I can only tell you the truth because I'm among friends here. I've actually had the WhatsApp group on silent. I've muted it for a little while purely because I've got so much going on. I'm trying to put the finishing touches to this publication to mark the 1000th episode. I'm also trying to put together the 1000th show, to have a few surprises along the line. And incidentally, there's going to be a couple of fairly big giveaways on that show. I will tell you more about that. Did you go and look at the poem, Mark? I did. And I wouldn't say I printed it off. I've copied it, so I've got it somewhere else. But I did look at it. Even better the second time of asking. Dan says, Mark, have you seen when we are available to meet up with Mick? Well, I haven't, but I will. I've got to be honest with you. Got a bit of a domestic issue at the moment. You will recall that my father-in-law passed away not so long ago, and he was actually my mother-in-law's carer. She has MS, and the past week has been not good around here. My other half is running around like a blue-ass fly, trying to keep this house afloat, but also her mother's as well. I think twice out in 3 days, we had the paramedics out to mother-in-law because she'd had a fall. At one point, we thought she'd had a stroke. So I'm a bit all over the place. I'm working on it, Dan. I promise you I'm working on it, but I don't know quite where we are at the moment. But I do want to meet up with Mick before he heads off. Come back to you on it. Jim Turner says decathlon. Yeah, what would we have as a decathlon? Give that some thought. Maybe, listen, I may even carry that one over to tomorrow. If you were going to have a decathlon of digger disciplines, what would be in it? What would be your 10? What would be the 10 ways to show that you were a supreme digger operator? Mick says, just to remind you, I'm off on the 10th. All things being equal, I'm going to be out of the country the week after that as well. So there is a bit of travel coming up. But the 10th, that gives us a bit of time to play with. Where are we now? We're the 19th. So we've probably got 3 weeks, I'm sure I can do something. Watch this space. I will come back to you. And I'll come back to the show in just a moment, immediately after a sousson.
Since the finance bill came into effect in April, the construction industry has seen a surge of fuel thefts. The rising cost of living has placed an additional risk of theft by employees and contractors, as well as opportunistic thieves. By using diesel dye and placing warnings of its use, you are sending a clear message that this is your fuel.
Yeah, thanks for that, Meg. Yeah, family does come first, but you're still got to get on with your life. So, listen, I'm working on it. Leave it with me. Anyway, I said this at the top of the show. I'm going to say it again now. Liebherr is in the pink.
Inspired by our chairman, Hancock Iron Ore has been a long-time supporter of raising awareness and funds for breast cancer patient care and research. Our operation is uniquely pink, with pink trucks, trains, cars, buildings and infrastructure. When we ordered a new Liebherr R9800, Liebherr generously agreed to paint the counterweight and bucket pink.
The Every Bucket Counts campaign was the genesis of a brainstorming session that took place between Hancock Iron Ore and Liebherr Australia as we were preparing for the delivery of the R9800 fleet. And in essence, we decided that we were going to make a donation to the National Breast Cancer Foundation based on the performance of the R9800. To all of our surprise and good sense, we saw that the Hancock team here on site and the operators actually outdug and outloaded their forecast for the month. And at the end of the month, what that has led to is a $50,000 donation by Liebherr Australia to the National Breast Cancer Research Foundation.
It's a first of its kind. Each year, our people fundraise to support the ongoing efforts for research and patient care. And it has been great to have Liebherr alongside us this year. Together, we can help make a difference to the lives of families battling this devastating disease.
This campaign reflects a partnership that we built with Hancock Iron Ore, I think principally because it really shows that there are shared values between our two organizations. We are committed to mining excellence, but equally as importantly, we're also committed to community causes like the one that we're supporting here.
I'm with Dan on that. Wow, amazing. Yeah, absolutely amazing. Well done. Well done to the company involved, but also well done to Liebherr Australia. Fantastic stuff. I mentioned this yesterday. We have a poet in our midst, Mr. McKenna, and he sent me another one. This is a short one, this one, so I'm going to do it very quickly. This is called Mark Anthony and his Bobcat hat. Now, I can only assume that he spotted the hat this morning and quickly rattled this off. Either that or he's plugged directly into an AI mainframe, because it says, on site he stands, a steady man with stories longer than a loading span. Through dust and noise, through this and that, there's always Mark and his Bobcat hat. It's seen the sun, the rain and the grime, a witness to both the graft and time. Like steel and diesel, flat to flat, you can't outlast that Bobcat hat. It nods to drivers rolling past, it tips to mates with laughs that last. A crown, a shield, a sign of chat. Mark Anthony and his Bobcat hat. And when the job is done each day, that hat still holds the dust and clay. Not just a hat, a symbol sat on the man himself. And that's Mark's Bobcat hat. I'm going to forward that to Bobcat. I promise you I'm going to forward that to Bobcat. Peter's even done a little, it's not the best way to show it, he's even done a little illustration of me in my Bobcat hat. Thanks, Peter. I'm astounded that I've inspired such a work of art. Mick says, was coming back for Christmas, but the building work on the main farmhouse is going in leaps and bounds. My daughter wants to arrange to come over with the brothers and have a Christmas in Italy, but we'll let you know. Not a problem. Hey, listen, Mick, if I fully intend to meet up with you before you go, but if I'm going to come to Italy to meet up with you, it's not the end of the world. I'm not. I wouldn't be that upset about it. Pretty much any excuse to go to Italy is okay by me. We've got one more film to show you, and it is a bit of a belter. I've saved it to last because it is a bit of a stormer. So stick around. We started the show in China. We then travelled just up the road. Geography is not a strong point. Just up the road to Australia. We're now heading for Germany. This video is 54 seconds long. Sit back, crank up the volume, and enjoy. Engineering excellence from the fine folks at Hagedorn. Well done to them. Now have a look. I actually wonder if the two of them were sat together, because somebody, it was Jim, I think, wasn't it? Was it Jim? Yes, Jim actually suggested that we had a digger decathlon. I asked what events would be, or what disciplines would be in there. Jim responded immediately with 1 lorry loading, 2 footings, 3 trimming, 4 forks, 5 digging around obstacles, 6 top soil stripping, 7 batter trimming, 8 pecking, 9 greasing up, and 10 digging out the tracks. Chris Ford immediately followed on with number 1, bucket change manually. Number 2, quick hitch, bucket change. Hose connect and disconnect as number 3. Number 4, speed dig. Number 5, precision dig. Number 6, grade and clean up. Also applied to 7, the dozer section, the reverse and position. Somebody out there, JCB, I've spoken to JCB this morning, who are very, very kindly, I'll tell you this now. I've reached out to JCB and a few others actually, about the fact that our 1000th show is coming up, and JCB have very kindly agreed to send us a goodie box to give away on the day. But yeah, JCB, Digger Olympics, there's your decathlon right there. I realise we already have operator competitions, but I think that would be really, 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 really rather good. Not a problem, Mark. Bring the other half. Free accommodation, local wines, top notch. Could always put Dan in a large trunk and sneak him in. Question for you, Mick. What is your nearest airport? Where I mean, I know roughly where you are. Are you near Bari? Is Bari your nearest airport? Going back to Chris, he did finish his decathlon. Number 8, precision lift and drop. Number 9, unblock the crusher. 10, the best bullshit. Finally, at long last, a category in which I might be able to compete. The best bullshit. 36-year career right here. 36 years of endless bullshit. That's me. And there you are. Mick says about 20 miles from Bari, in the nicest bit of Italy. Well, I say that there are lots of nice places in Italy. Siena. Oh, Siena. Bergamo. Verona. Everywhere, just like Italy. Can't we have the 1000th show at JCB? I'm up for having the day off and spending it with you. Jim, I would love to. I have spoken to JCB about this over some considerable time. My issue is, well, I mean, first of all, foremost, they will be just back off their annual shutdown, which is not exactly ideal. The biggest problem I have with this show, I can take it on the road, but I'm completely at the mercy of the other end. Do I have somewhere quiet? Do I have somewhere with decent lighting? And I can take the lighting with me a bit, and I can control it to a degree. Do I have a fast, very fast and stable internet connection? All of that. You'll remember the issues that we had when I was broadcasting live from Intermat, and we really pushed the boat out to get the space there, and it came through loud and clear, and the image was pretty good, but I was in a room that was echoey and the sound wasn't marvelous and stuff. Not the easiest. to the point where as I say, I am going off on my travels. And one of the reasons I'm going off on my travels again in September is purely because the original discussion was going to be an evening live stream, but I want control. I want to be able to deliver the best possible quality. So we opted against that, but it's a great idea. I mean, there was also idea of doing the 1,000th show at Plantworks. No, just not going to happen. Anywho, people, that is pretty much it for the main part of this morning's show. I'm going to roll the outro, and I'm also going to adjust my face because I've been quite cheerful this morning. I'm getting serious after this, but yeah, I'm going to roll the outro in just a second before leaping gazelle-like over into my morning monologue. If you can't stick around for that, please stay safe. Look after yourself, your family, your friends, and your colleagues, and I hope to see you again very soon. Tomorrow would be good, but if you do have the time, and the inclination, I'll be back in just a moment. What do we got that? That's a thought. Could do a show from there. Well, listen, any excuse. Me, couple of large espressos and a big bowl of pasta. I'll go anywhere. Not a problem at all. Morning monologue time. Back after this. What will it take? What will it take for the UK demolition industry to accept its responsibilities? What will it take for the sector to address the accidents, the fatalities, and the corruption? What will it take for the industry to quit resting on its laurels and make the positive changes required to be competitive and relevant in the 21st century? What will it take? You might think that the worst and most deadly accident in the industry's living memory might prompt some self-analysis, that the loss of 4 lives in a single tragic accident might be a perfect excuse for some much-needed introspection. You might also think that a 9.5-year investigation that remains ongoing might be cause for a reconsideration of both health and safety and with those that police it. You might think that all of those things, and let me do that again, you might think all of those things, but you'd be wrong. Instead of taking a long, hard look at itself in the mirror, the UK demolition industry has hidden behind the inadequacies of others, refusing to comment until the Thames Valley Police has completed its investigation into the Didcot disaster, refusing to take any action until the Health and Safety Executive has its say on those long overdue findings. And all the while the industry prevaricates, working men continue to perish. At Longannet, at Redcar, at countless other places up and down the country, the names of which now live in infamy within demolition circles. You might think that having its corrupt and dark underbelly laid bare for all to see might have brought about change, that the handing down of more than £60 million in fines to some of the biggest and best-known names in the industry might provoke a step back and a pause. You might think that a series of director bans in the aftermath of the Competition and Markets Authority investigation into corruption and collusion might set the industry on a new and more transparent course. That the fact that all 10 guilty companies were part of the same trade body makes some question. That the fact that all 10 guilty companies were part of the same trade body might make some question the validity of their elite status claims. You might also think that having been caught with their fingers in the cookie jar, those guilty companies might find themselves isolated, ejected from tender lists, banished to the industry naughty step. You might think all of those things, but you'd be wrong. With 1 or 2 notable exceptions, the companies found guilty for their part in the corruption ring have largely prospered since. And in the place of sanctions, the trade body of which all 10 companies were a member reached for a broom and chose to instead swoop the whole sorry business under the nearest rug. You might think that the existential threat from the environmental lobby and the embodied carbon campaigners might have forced a reaction. You might have thought that the removal of the subsidy on red diesel might have caused outrage and outcry. You might have thought that the imposition of increasingly stringent carbon reduction measures might have brought the industry together to fight back or at least delay changes that threaten the very nature of the industry. You might think all of those things, but you'd be wrong. When the environmental lobby urged government to make demolition a last resort, the industry rolled over like a puppy that's been beaten once too often. When the Treasury came for its red diesel subsidy, the industry barely raised a whimper. Even now, as the sector is being pushed inexorably towards the adoption of electric and hydrogen equipment, together with their respective challenges and collective unknowns, the industry is sticking its bottom in the air and saying, do your worst. You might think that the slow and debilitating exodus of some of the industry's most experienced workers would set off alarm bells, that the industry's apparent inability to attract and retain new workers to replace them would cause a large red flag to be unfurled. You might think that by now someone would have spotted the gulf between card carrying and competent and introduced a form of training that is more in keeping with the demands of sites rather than regulators and their classrooms. You might think that a suicide rate that is almost 4 times the national average might justify a complete overhaul of working practices, that an industry-wide mental health crisis might be the straw that broke the camel's back, might be the line in the sand, the tipping point. You might think all of those things, but once again, you'd be wrong. The industry has made no significant changes to its recruitment policies in decades. Any changes it's made to training and competent cards, any changes it's made to its training and competent card scheme, I will get this right. Any changes it has made to training and competence card schemes has been largely in the form of price increases. Even though every mental health practitioner in the world will tell you that men are notoriously bad at opening up to each other, we've decided that the solution to the mental health crisis is to make some of those men mental health first aiders, because apparently thousands of years of macho evolution can be undone by a job title and a name badge. And all the while, working practices remain unaltered. Every project is a race against the clock. Every worker is constantly under the cosh. Mental health awareness meetings end so that workers can be reminded of the pressures of the project. Regardless of the challenge and regardless of the need to change, the UK demolition industry is set to business as usual by default. There is no straying from the well-trodden path, no exploration of potentially better routes and alternatives. Whether it's accidents and suicides, or a mass exodus from the industry, or a switch from demolition to refurbishment, the answer is always the same. Keep doing what we've always done. That head in the sand approach might have been okay in the past, but it's no longer fit for the rigours, challenges, and scrutiny of the 21st century. So what will it take? What will it take for the UK demolition industry to accept its responsibilities? What will it take for the sector to address the accidents, the fatalities, and the corruption? What will it take for the industry to quit resting on its laurels and make the positive changes required to be competitive and relevant in the 21st century? What will it take? There you are. I can get through the entire show. Get to the morning monologue. Suddenly, nose starts itching. Lose me way. Eye starts itching. Desperate to sneeze. There's something about the morning monologue that brings out the worst. But there you are. That was my morning monologue today. And just to recap, when you think about all of the lines in the sand that we could have drawn, Didcot, the CMA investigation, red diesel, the embodied carbon lobby, all of those opportunities for the industry to say, stop, let's get our heads together, regardless of your affiliations to trade associations, and there are a couple. Regardless of all that, let's take a big step back. Let's get our heads together and let's see how collectively we are going to address all of this. And at no point has that happened. Even the Didcot disaster. Well, the Didcot disaster is one. There were meetings within the NFDC to decide how long the minute or the 4-minute silence was going to be at the first AGM after the Didcot disaster happened. Not how we're going to address this, not how are we going to inform members without prejudicing any ongoing inquiry. How are we going to change as an industry to ensure that Didcot is never repeated? Never happened. The CMA investigation, the response there was, we'll get the members of the NFDC to sign a little piece of paper to say we will be good boys and we will not be involved in collusion and bid rigging. Really. No sanctions, no major changes to the way that the industry works, just business as usual. Embodied carbon. We've got an actual existential threat. If the environmental lobby gets its way, and let's be honest, it's hard to argue against the environmental lobby, because ultimately, regardless of where you stand on these things, what they're saying, we need to protect the environment, is absolutely right. It's hard to argue against that. So while they're standing up and saying demolition is the devil, we should abandon it as quickly as we possibly can. If we can possibly refurbish or improve a building, then that should be the first course of action, not demolition. You would have thought that those involved in the demolition industry, those that are working in it, and those whose livelihood depend upon the continuation of demolition, would have got their heads together and, fellas, we've got a problem here. What are we going to do? How are we going to fight our corner? How are we going to argue our case? How are we going to tell the environmental lobby of our own environmental credentials? The fact that we are supplying valuable secondary materials, the fact that we're clearing space. How are we going to do that? Nope. In actual fact, word on the street is, when I first started talking about embodied carbon, it was raised in an NFDC meeting, and they were told, don't worry about it. It's just that Mark Antony rabble rousing again, just scaremongering. Really, you tell those demolition companies that were eyeing a major project, a tower block demolition that was subsequently shelved because somebody on high decided embodied carbon first. You try telling them that I'm scaremongering. Over to the chat. And it also says those who ignore industry, those who ignore history are doomed to relive it. Is that a Churchill? I mean, I've definitely heard it before. Is that a Churchill? I'm not entirely sure. Mick says, sorry, mate, there will never be a change from the NFTC. And to be honest, it needs disbanding and something new put in its place, but don't ask me what. It's at this point, and I have done 982 of these shows, and I've said this on a lot of occasions. I don't want the NFTC disbanded, but I do want it or something to be more representative of the industry as it is today. And I've always said, I would much rather somebody came along and just, reshaped what we were, there is 80 plus years of legacy there. And, back in the day, it used to do a lot of good work. If we could find some way of just kind of overlooking the last 15, 20 years and said, okay, we're going to go back to square one. And, what was this set up for? The greater good of the demolition industry. Let's get back to basic principles. If they could do that, then the NFDC would have my full backing. But what does it do? What does it do? As I say, I said this yesterday, they're off to somewhere for their annual convention for the August bank holiday, which is coming up very, very soon. For what? For what? Does anybody honestly believe that they're going to return and say, after discussion in wherever the hell it was, we have decided that the industry, which is currently on this path, is going on this path. We're going to do this. We're going to improve this and improve this. This will benefit our members. This will benefit the wider industry. Nothing. There will be nothing. Jim Turner says the industry is a business, so make solving the problem the cheapest or most profitable way, and the rest will fall in place. Overall, I agree with that. But when you've been around, and Jim, you've been around not quite as long as me, perhaps, but you've been around for a while. There are many, many vested interests. When you think about all that I've just said about the issues with the demolition industry, Didcot, Long Gannet, Redcar, the CMA investigation, embodied carbon, the training regime, the competence card schemes, and everything else, all the way along the line, there is a financial imperative for things to remain as they are, all the way along the line. And all the while that's the case, even the cheapest or most profitable way kind of takes second billing. Mick says, only thing I do know, there are many buildings from the 60s on that are suffering concrete rot. Sooner or later, they will have to come down. The environmentalists know this, but they work on the idea that a plaster or bandage will sort it out. You're right. You're right. But who is telling that story? when you the embodied carbon thing. I mean, I think I was on it fairly early doors. But the embodied carbon argument has been in the national press. It's been on the TV. It's been in the Times, the Telegraph, the Guardian, and so on down the line. It's been the discussion point on podcasts and everything else. And every single time, in every single instance, it has been the environmentalists saying demolition is Satan itself and should therefore be outlawed. We have all this valuable embodied carbon that we must not at any cost waste. Demolition must be either outlawed or pushed to the very edge of acceptability, to the point where it's not a case of we're going to demolish this building. It should be a case of we want to demolish this building, now prove that it is the viable way to do it. Completely turning the system on its head. In no instance that I can think of has the industry itself stood up to refute those claims, to argue its corner. At no point. The voice of the demolition industry is mute. It's taken a vow of silence, just talks to itself. Who is fighting the industry's corner? Dan says, yes, yeah, that and the CITB should be disbanded and refreshed. More on-site visits, assessing operators and companies, not just on computer and emails. I sound like a broken record, but if you've got a competence card scheme that is so mistrusted by the industry that those with a real eye on skills and competence will insist, yes, you've got your card, but we want you to prove that card is kosher, not just in terms of validity, but it says here that you're an excavator operator. Show us, prove it. We will require you to do a different test or an additional test. If the system we have is so mistrusted, the system doesn't work. Surely the very notion of a competence card is like a passport. Assuming that my passport is valid and, I've got it through the proper channels, I should be able to go to Italy or Germany or America or Australia, show my passport, and they look at it, and they look at me and they go, yep, he's okay to let in the country. He is kosher. Can you say the same for any single competence card? Or are you looking at that competence card and saying, well, the photographs match. Is he competent? Couldn't tell you. Couldn't tell you. We'll have to find out. And even if you're not one of the big sites where, like HS2 or Hinkley Point, where you're actually running additional tests, you know full well that if you arrive first day on a new project, show your card, you know that someone somewhere is watching you to make sure that you are the real deal and you haven't just got your card off Etsy or PayPal or something like that. They are watching you. There is a gap. I think I said it in the monologue. There is a gap between a competence card and competence, and that is potentially where accidents happen. And if we have any real value on, or if we place any real store by the notion of a competence card, then there should not be a gap. You've got a competence card, you are competent. That's how it's supposed to work. Andy Thornton says, there seems to be two elements, finding who's responsible, making sure it never happens again, and they both seem to be diametrically opposed. Yeah. If you can't find who's responsible and therefore why it happened, how can you make sure it doesn't happen again? Yeah. But when you think about that, and I know you're talking about accidents primarily there, and you're absolutely right. And there is still some doubt about exactly what caused Didcot and everything else. But if you apply that same notion to the CMA investigation into collusion and bid rigging, we know who's responsible. We know what they did. We know the degree to which they did it. There is documentary proof of all of that. And as an industry, we just went, yeah, it's all terrible. £60 million in fine, terrible. Oh, the behaviour, terrible. Direct bans, terrible. Right, who's up for the next big job then? You guys? Yeah, not a problem. That's what we did. Mick says, mind you, there are buildings that are 30 to 50 years old that are earmarked for demolition, reason being the faults are now showing up due to the materials that are used are not fit for purpose. Yeah, there's a bit of that as well. And, where is the argument there? Where is the argument there? Just going back to the environmental lobby, Yes, the building is only 30 years old. Yes, the materials within it do contain embodied carbon. You know, they were won from the ground, they were erected, they have been cared for, but they're not fit for purpose. It's going to come down. And all the refurbishment in the world is not going to make up for the fact that the building was built using the wrong materials. Simple. Some got their cards off tickets. Tack shop? Not sure. Jim Turner says, close the CITB, make our tickets last a lifetime, put us through official government-run test centres with provisional licences and L plates on site until enough experience has been gained to take the full test. Yeah. Who ultimately, there was, sorry, Dan Cullen was saying the TikTok shop. That makes more sense now. Who ultimately is the most critical judge of an operator's capabilities? Is it the operator himself? Generally not. They all think they are God's gift to machine operation. Is it a training organization where the trainer has never actually done the job himself? No. Is it the competence card scheme who are just basically looking to sell a few more cards? No. Is it a trade association whose livelihood is at least partly dependent upon the income from those competence cards? No. The ultimate arbiter here are those on site working beside that operator, be it their colleagues or their superiors. If you turn up and you are a bad, an unsafe operator, you will be found out in that long. That's where the test belongs. Nick says, it's us, yeah. Listen, I don't do it for a living, but I can tell the difference in about 3 seconds flat, difference between a good operator and a bad operator, particularly in demolition. I've seen people like Paul McKay. I'm not sure if Paul's here, but I've certainly seen Andy Darvell operating a high reach. And a high reach is a very, very, it's a very telling, very revealing item of equipment because it's operating kind of at the extremes. It's at extreme height, and the machine itself is kind of a compromise. It was designed to dig down. You're now operating it up. The slightest bit of poor operation and the machine starts to do this, that you're missing when you're biting, you're overreaching and all that, it becomes immediately evident. I can spot that as a non-professional. I can spot that a mile off. Those on site will do the same. So now I ask you, what actual value does a competence card hold? And take that a stage further. If you've got a brand new operator arrives, you hand in the keys to a 30-meter high reach. It says on his piece of plastic that he is a high reach operator, that he's permitted to work up to 30 meters, whatever it might be. You've checked his CV and everything else, but you've got a piece of plastic that says high reach operator. He has been through the NDTG testing and everything else, and he is okay. And you let him loose with that 30-meter machine, and the thing's like a rocking horse. There's debris going all over the place. It's standing on tippy toes for a bit of the time. How much are you looking at that card and thinking, well, everything will be okay because I've got a bit of plastic? Or are you looking at that and thinking that guy's going to kill himself or somebody else? And if you're thinking that piece of card, that piece of plastic that guy's shown you, what is that actually worth? Nothing. Nothing at all. What will it take for the industry to change? One of the things that prompted that, I said this very, very long while ago. One of my concerns with health and safety, and I'm speaking specifically about demolition fatalities here. We are in an industry where, regardless of what people tell you, ultimately, the lowest bid normally wins. Just the nature of the beast. Let me make you an example. If there is a project to be done, a demolition project, and you have a bid in from one company that says it's going to cost you 100,000, and you have a bid in from another company that says it's going to cost you £105,000. You have a bid in from another company that says it's going to be £95,000, and you have a final bid that comes in that says we'll do it for £30,000. Okay, and you opt, as a client, you opt to hand that job to Mr. £30,000. What if that job then goes tits up? The building that they're working on ends up in the road. It damages a car. It hits a passing bus. It injures a cyclist that's going past. It kills someone on site. Who is responsible for that? Now, you know, the letter of the law as it stands at the moment says that it is the demolition contractor. The demolition contractor will have, you know, will ultimately, almost certainly, be found negligent. They'll have cut a corner. There'll be a paper trail to say. But at what point do we say, hang on a minute, we've got a, you know, if a company is spending 100 or 30 grand or whatever it might be on a demolition project, they should have done their homework. And if you've got 3 people, that's 3, that's 4. If you've got 3 different companies all saying that's going to cost roughly £100,000, and one has said we'll do it for 30, should that not be enough of a red flag for you to go, that doesn't sound right? That doesn't sound kosher at all. And if that isn't kosher and something does go wrong, are you not, as the client, are you not at least partly responsible for that? I've said this for a long time. We need, in order to address this, we need a high-profile client to be prosecuted. I hate the fact that it will require an accident or potentially a fatality for it to happen. But surely, at the point where we say, you have gone for the lowest bid against the best advice from all these other companies, you have chosen to take the cheapest route purely to save money, never mind to safeguard health and safety. You have chosen to bypass all of that to save a few quid. You are at least partly responsible for that. And until that happens, the lowest bid will continue to win. Corner cutting will continue. Mick says, have a safe day, gents, and when it's all done in Italy and you're ever over there, you're welcome anytime. Off to do my shopping. Good luck to you, Mick. I will bear that in mind, but I will come back to you on doing something before you head off to God's back garden, Italy. It's my favourite place. What can I tell you? Anyway, people, that's an hour and 20 minutes of your life you're never getting back. And for that, I can only apologise. I shall return tomorrow for more of the same. Maybe a bit more upbeat. Know my track record? Probably not. But I'll be back tomorrow at 10 a.m. Until then, everybody, have a fine and splendid day. Look after yourselves. See you soon.